All right, welcome back to round 2. My name is Lance Ruby, and this is my Blues and Beyond course with Jam Play. And this is week 2. If you missed out on last week, that's totally okay. You can see that lesson if you're a Jam Play member. If not, you can't watch the replay, but you know, if you're liking the series so far, I would encourage you to go become a Jam Play member to check out the older lessons and be able to rewatch them. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about the most common variation of the standard blues we talked about last week. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the quick change blues. Okay, so if we remember back to last week, we talked about our basic 12-bar blues, and you might already be familiar with 12-bar blues. But a good way to think about the 12-bar blues, the standard 12-bar blues, is that it's kind of 3 chunks of 4 bars. So we're just breaking the first chunk on our standard blues is 4 bars of the 1 chord, whatever key we might be in. The second chunk is going to be 2 bars of the 4 chord, 2 bars of the 1 chord, and then our final chunk is 1 bar of the 5 chord, 1 bar of the 4 chord, 1 bar of the 1 chord, and then it's optional, you hear it both ways, or just stay on the 1 chord. So, the quick change blues, the big difference between what I just talking about today, the only chunk for quick change blues, that first chunk is going to be 1 chord for 1 bar, 4 chord for the next bar of the 1 chord. So one more time, 1 bar of the 1 chord, 1 bar of the 4 chord, and then 2 bars of the 1 chord. This is why it's called a quick change blues, because we go back to the 1 in the first 4 bars. So let's jump right in and check out our chord voicings this week. Okay, so last week we talked about some really awesome, convenient for jazz blues or for blues. This week we are going to be talking about some more complex sounding chords for the blues, but they're still really common. You can hear guys like, you know, the rhythm guitar player for B.B. King. He played these types of chord voicings a lot, and you know, a lot of modern guys like Robin Ford and Josh Smith use these styles of chord. So make sure that you pull up the tab, and it might be on screen, but let's just talk about each of these. Along the way, if you have any questions, make sure just to leave them in the chat, and I will be popping in at the end of this lesson to answer all and any of your questions. Okay, so let's jump into these chord voicings. So the first chord voicing we have is A9. So we're putting our string 4th fret, our 3rd finger on the 4th string 5th fret, 2nd finger on the 3rd string 4th fret, and then finally we're going to put our 4th finger or our pinky on the 2nd string 5th fret. Now, this might kind of be an odd chord voicing for you, especially if you're coming from the lame normal chord grips. And the biggest kind of thing with this is that we don't have the root in there. As I talked about last week, really when we're comping or playing rhythm guitar, in other words, it's typical, and it actually sounds better if we avoid kind of the bottom string altogether. If you think about it, the bass player's kind of job is to play root notes. So we can use that as an opportunity for us, being like one of the main chording instruments in a blues context, to play chords that don't have the root in them because the bass is already handling that. Another thing specifically with this chord grip is that we can just imagine there's our root. So, you can think about it, try and get your thumb up there to play it with the root, or how I do it is just tap it so I can see it and not have to actually grab it. So there's our chord voicing for A9, which will be the 1 chord this week. For the 4 chord, we're going to play a D9 chord. This is a very common chord grip. I'm sure that maybe you've seen it or something like it. This is like what I think of as like the James Brown. That kind of music makes me think about this chord grip. And we have our second finger on the 5th string, 5th fret. My first finger is on the 4th string, 4th fret. And then I'm doing kind of a bar with my 3rd finger across the top 3 strings on the 5th fret. So that's D9. That's going to be our 4 chord this week. And then finally, our 5 chord is going to be this E13. Now, it doesn't look like an E chord, right? But we can still do the same thing. Basically, our root note is going to be right here on the 7th fret of the 5th string. But also what's unique about this chord is that it does have the root in it, but it's just on the 2nd string. And all those colorful, juicy notes in the E13 chord are in the bottom, which is common for like piano players or most other chording instruments. Like I think of organ when I think of these kinds of sounds. But for guitar, it's weird. We always want the root to be in the bottom of the chord. And we get a lot of cool color if we don't have that. Okay, so now that we've gone over our chord grips, let's just play them in order, and then we'll get into the comping exercise this week. So our 1 chord is A9. Our 4 chord is D9. This week is E13. Now what's really cool about this is that we're playing through all the blues, but we're only moving like maybe 1 fret from chord to chord. This gives us a really kind of slick, pianistic quality to our comping. Okay, cool. So let's jump in to the comping exercise, which is on the tab. And if we look, let's just check out the first 3 bars first. So it starts out with the Charleston rhythm, which is what we talked about last time. And then on beat 4 we have something odd. It's our D9, but we're playing it a half step up. So it's E9, or E flat 9 rather, sorry. But if we look the next beat 1 of the next bar, we're landing on D9, the 4 chord. So this is a really cool trick that we can use when we're comping blues. And all that means, that's just fancy language for being a fret below or a fret above where we actually want to be, and then landing on the correct chord. So, out of the context of the comping exercise this week, it sounds like this. Okay, but I could have also done an approach from below, meaning a fret down from D9. So that would be the exact same thing that's on the handout, but instead of going a fret, going a fret below and coming up to D9. Okay, so that's that. Let me play the rest of those first two bars. So we have... Based off of those chord grips we learned last time, we're sliding in to our D7 chord voicing from last time. And then on the fifth fret of the first string, I'd pick back to our A9 chord. So those first two bars. Okay, moving on to the fourth bar, we have 1, 2. Okay, so again, we're using the chord grip from last week's lesson. We're starting off with our A9 from this week. And then we're playing our A13 from last week. And I'm just using this as a way to propel ourselves into the next measure. 2, 3, and 4, and 1. And then I'm playing that D9 voicing back to the Charleston. Twice. Back to A. Okay, now in this next measure, we are playing the 5 chord as a whole note. So we're going 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1. One more time. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1. So that's a really cool bar, and this is a common kind of thing you hear with rhythm guitar players in blues, is that we are holding one out, and then we have 2 syncopated hits. So on the and of 3 and the and of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1. Cool. So this also, if you notice that last chord, and this is measure 15 on the tab, we're doing that chromatic approach thing again, and we're doing it above again. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there's our chromatic approach down to D9. 1, 2, 3, back to 1, and then a big half note on the 5 chord. Okay, cool. Let me play this all the way through, and then I'll play it with the backing track. And yeah, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. Okay, let me pull up the backing track and I will play it along. Also, if you notice, the comping that's happening on the backing track is exactly what our comping exercise this week is. So if you need to be able to play along with it a lot and kind of get those rhythms and chord grips under your fingers, use the backing track. It's a good way to practice comping. So let's pull that up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool, awesome. So let's talk about a couple of the little nuanced things that are happening in this. So, if you notice, we go to the 4 chord in the second bar. That's kind of the biggest difference from what we did last week, right? That's what makes this a quick change blues. And then other than that, we're just using the chord grips from last week, the Charleston rhythm, and the chord grips from this week. And when I'm able to, I'm adding some little chromatic approaches and our chord grips from last week. Okay? So, although I do think that this comping exercise is great and will help you get those under your fingers, the best way is to learn this and then, of course, experiment with it. Try and use these tricks in other spots of the tune. Also, try and vary the rhythms. Try and, use different, the two sets of chord changes we have right now. Try and use the different voicings and really try and make it your own. But ultimately, we have to be able to get the exercise down first before we can start experimenting with it. Okay, cool. Let's move on to our licks this week. We got some cool licks. The first lick, and you can see it's on the next page of the tab. Oh, and just a reminder, if you have any questions about what we've talked about thus far, just leave them in the chat, and I'm going to pop in at the end and answer all of our questions. Okay, cool. So our first lick this week is a really cool lick because it addresses the quick change blues, meaning it actually plays notes of the chords in that quick change blues. Meaning, when we're on the A chord, it's playing notes from that chord. When that quick change to the 4 chord comes in, it's addressing that. It's playing notes from that chord. And then when we go back to A, it's playing a note from that chord. Now, this is maybe different than a lot of people play over it, I would say the two approaches to playing over a quick change blues are ignoring the quick change and addressing the quick change. And you could send me millions of recordings of awesome guitar players and awesome solos that ignore the quick change. But I don't really have to teach you how to ignore chord changes, right? Like, we can kind of all do that. But we do want to be able to address them, right? We want to be able to point out the change that happens in it, the chord changes that happen in the blues, as opposed to just ignoring them. Both approaches are totally valid, but if you don't know how to address the quick change blues, work on that. And if you don't know how to just ignore it and play blues over it, work on that. Okay, cool. So, like I said, this first lick addresses the chord changes in the blues, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So our the first part of the lick, well, I'll play the whole lick, and then we'll get into it. 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, one more time. Oh, I played it in B flat. Sorry. Here we go. 1, 3, 4, 1, 2. There's the right key. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so check it out. The first part of our lick is we're going. Okay, this is a classic blues phrase. Also used over the turnaround quite a bit, especially in slower blues. But what's happening is that we're with our third finger playing the 4th string 7th fret. And on the tab it says that there's just a slide. But really what I'm actually playing is I'm hammering on from the 5th fret 3rd string to the 6th fret 3rd string. So far we have. Okay. Okay. The next little move. 2nd fret 5th string. 5th fret 2nd string. And then the 7th fret 3rd string. So far we have this. Okay. So let's talk about how that is addressing the chord that's happening. Well, if we kind of just hold down the notes that we play, those first 3 notes. Okay, and I'm ignoring the hammer-on just for a sec, just the note we end up on. Well, if we look at that, that's actually an A major triad, right? Like this big, A7 bar chord. All of those notes are in there. Also, all of those notes are in our just normal bar chord we'd play. So, as you can see, we're really saying with our line, hey, this is an A chord, right? We're not really even bending or playing other notes. We're just playing the notes from the chord. Okay, so now let's move on to the second part of the phrase. So far we have... Okay, so let's start here. We have 7th fret on the 3rd string, and then 7th fret on the 2nd string, 5th fret on the 1st string twice, so good, one more time, and then 7th fret on the 3rd string, 5th fret on the 1st string, so far we have one more time. And then we end it off by sliding from the 8th fret to the 9th fret on the 1st string. So okay, so let's check out that second part of the lick and show you how that is relating to the D chord. Okay, so we have, so in just that amount. So if I hold down the notes that if I hold down the individual notes I'm playing in that lick, we get this shape, right? And you can kind of see, if you're familiar with triads or the Chord Shapes, that's a D chord. That's a D triad, a D major triad. And we can think of that because it's a part of this bar chord, right? Some people play like this, right? It's like our A shape, but playing a D chord, if you're familiar with the Chord Shapes. If you're not, just ignore what I just said. But as you can see, the notes we're playing in that lick is all just the notes from that D major triad. Okay, and then that last little slide, we're basically sliding into a note to bring us back to A. We're sliding into the C sharp, which if we play this Chord shape, you can see that C sharp is a part of the A chord. Okay, cool. So I think that's enough breakdown for that lick. Let's play it along with the track. And I'm gonna play it through 2 or 3 times, but I'm just gonna let it roll. So this lick really only exists over the first 3 bars of the blues, and then I'm just gonna wait until that part happens again, okay? And then maybe I'll play it how it's written twice, and then I'll start messing with it the next time. And I'll kind of talk us through that. Okay, let me pull up the backing track. Whoops. Okay, here we go. 1, 2. So this is the second chunk. Back to 1 chord. All right, here's our third chunk. 5 chord to the 4 chord to the 1 chord. Back to the 5. Here our lick comes again. And 5 chord and 4 chord, 1 chord. Now I'm gonna mess with it. So, with that last lick, I wasn't doing anything that is too far-reaching from the lick, right? I repeated notes from the lick, and I basically played the lick, but I just messed with it, right? Right? I'm just repeating the first note of every phrase a couple times before going into it. Okay, that's our first phrase this week, our first lick. And it's a great lick to practice and get over that quick change. So next time somebody calls a quick change blues, you can play a lick where your line says we're playing a quick change rather than ignoring it. And there's nothing wrong with ignoring it. There's plenty of awesome blues guitar players that completely ignore the quick change when they're playing a quick change blues. But it's always better to be able to do it and then choose not to, okay? And if those shapes I was talking about are maybe a little confusing, or you want to dive in deeper on that kind of stuff, my course on jam play that is the complete scale and arpeggio system, we get into all that stuff at a really deep level. So you would be able to look at this lick and understand the arpeggios and the shapes that we're using, you know, with the help of that course. Okay, cool. Let's check out our next lick. And as you can see on the handout, on the tab, that we have 4 licks. They're the same. If you look at the notes above and the rhythms, they're the exact same. But basically, we're taking that BB box, that BB King box that we talked about last week, and now we're expanding upon it. So instead of the BB King box existing on a couple strings, now we can play the BB box on whatever strings we want. Excuse me. And so far, if anybody has any questions, just a reminder, leave them in the chat below, and I'm going to be popping in live at the end and answering all your questions. So let's jump in to our lick. So here's just the beginning lick. I'm going to play it kind of slow, and then we're going to talk about how to move that around to get the most out of the BB box. Okay? So here's the lick. One more time. Okay, so if you're familiar with the BB King box that we talked about last week, we're using those notes and how we talked about them. So we're going 9th fret on the 3rd string to the 11th fret on the 3rd string, and then the 10th fret on the 2nd string, which is our root, and then back to 11 on the 3rd string, back to our root. So far we have I'm using just my 2nd and 1st finger, and that's because our next move, we're going to be grabbing this note on the 13th fret of the 2nd string and bending it up a half step. So we just want a half step. A good way to check that, we talked about this last week, but we're just sliding a fret up, and then we're trying to match that sound with our bend. Okay, so far the lick is this. Okay. And then the next move is that we're hammer on and pulling off. So we're doing a hammer on from the 10th fret on the 2nd string, and then we're pulling off to the 10th fret. So That's the phrase. So here's what we got so far. One more time. Okay, this next part is what I think really makes this lick sound really soulful. So that's the phrase. So we're sliding up, to the 14th fret on the first string, and then 12th fret on the first string. So, and then we're doing this awesome slide lick. So we're going 13 and sliding that down to the 12th fret. And then we're ending on. Okay, that's the lick. It's pretty cool. But we need to be able to move the BB King box around, be able to play that lick wherever we want. So the first step for that is locating the root in the lick. Now I said already that it is the 10th fret on the second string. I always call this area of the guitar, I've noticed with my students, this area of the guitar is kind of the Bermuda Triangle of the guitar. Like everybody gets kind of lost on what the notes are, and like strings 2, 3, and 4 kind of in this area. But there's a really easy way that we could find whatever note that we want all over the fretboard. So here's a little trick. So a lot of us will know the notes on the 6th string and the 5th string, right? Just from playing, right? Our bar chords kind of teach us the notes on the 5th and the 6th string, but we can find all the. I'm going to go through and find all the A notes on the guitar and follow along, okay? So I know that the 5th fret on the 6th string is an A note, right? Because we have all of our bar chords that are all A notes. Okay, so we can find all the other notes by just using octaves. So to play an octave, we're going to skip a string and go up a fret. So now I'm playing another A note on the 7th fret, 4th string. You can hear that those notes are the same. Okay, to find the next octave, the A note that we're using in this BB box, we're going to go up 2 frets and skip a string. So far, here's all of the A notes we've found. Okay, and this is true for any key. It's the same shape. So if I wanted to do this in C, it's the same shape. They're just going to be in different locations. Okay, so we found the A note that we use for this first BB King lick. Okay. Okay, and we can do the same thing starting on the 5th string. Okay, so we know this because hopefully we've tuned our guitars, but the 5th string open is an A note. And then all of our open notes are an octave higher here on the 12th fret. So A. But we can still do that jumping strings to find octaves here. So check this out. There's our A note. I'm kind of imagining that my first finger's here, and I'm skipping a string and going up 2 frets. There's our other A note. From here, I'm going to skip a string and go up 3 frets. And I found my A. I can also do the exact same thing starting on the 12th fret. So those are all of our A notes. First starting with the 6th string, and now with the 5th string, and now up an octave. Cool. Okay, so having the knowledge of where all of those A notes are going to really help us out for this next segment. So that was A note on the second string. Now the next lick, the A note, is going to be on the third string. So there it is. So it's going to be on the second fret, third string. And we can now just play the same lick, but now we're going to be down a string. Okay, so now the lick sounds like this. Okay, so you can hear, right? Same lick, we're just playing it on a new set of strings. And because of that, we now have a whole new cool vibe to the lick, right? We have a whole different sound just because we're playing it on different strings. Okay, cool. So that's the second lick. Okay, let's move on to the third lick. So this one is having our A note be on the fourth string. So I'm using, there's our A note on the fourth string. I'm just using our octave trick to find that. And then so here would be that lick with the A note being here. Cool, that's even like a similar fingering to what we'd use on the first time, right? On the second string. So and now we have an even different vibe, right? A different sound. Same lick, but it sounds way different. My favorite thing to do with this kind of string set, right, these kind of lower strings, is to pick kind of farther back on the bridge. So if I'm playing this version, our first version of the lick, I'm picking here-ish, but it has a really cool flavor of when we're playing on the lower strings to play back here. So has a cool kind of twanginess to it. And then the final one is that we're going to be playing that lick, but A is now going to be on the fifth string. Well, we know where that is. Okay, so here's the lick on the fifth string. The other thing that we kind of have to adjust for when we're playing the BB box in these different positions is just the direction in which we bend. The first time I played that lick, I'm bending the string up towards the ceiling. But in that last example, I'm pulling it down towards the ground. I don't think there's really any hard or fast rules, but obviously I can't bend that up or it falls off the fretboard. I don't have enough room to bend that. So just make sure when you're going through and learning this lick in the different zones on the neck that you're paying close attention to which direction you're bending. Just as a general rule, and I'm sure that I have broke this rule and a lot of people have, but just as a general rule, if I'm bending notes on the top three strings, I'm going to bend them towards the ceiling. And when I'm bending notes on the lower three strings, I'm going to bend them towards the ground, down towards the ground. Okay, cool. So let me, I'm going to play this lick in those different zones over the backing track so you can hear how each of these different variations sound. Okay, let me get that backing track pulled up. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the first way we played it. That's the second way. Now I'm gonna pick way back here on the same one. That's a cool sound. And then the lowest one. Okay, so that's just an example. I was kind of talking about this last week, but when we learn licks, it's really cool to be able to play licks that, you know, our favorite players like Jimi Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan, like to learn those guys' licks, it's great. It's so good for your playing. But we're sort of missing out if we play those licks the exact same way every single time. We want to be injecting those licks with our personality and, you know, how we play, all this kind of stuff. So you can tell it's a B.B. King-ish lick. I don't know if you ever played it exactly like this, but this is kind of B.B. King inspired, right? And it's something that you could imagine him playing, right? And all I'm doing is taking it around and playing it in different spots of the neck. I'm not changing the notes. I'm not really changing the rhythm. The rhythm might have changed when I was playing it over the backing track just because of where I was playing it, you know, in the form. But really nothing changed. But each area of the neck I played it had a totally different vibe. And that's what we want to be doing. That's a way to expand. You know, we just learned this killer B.B. King lick. Well, if we don't have any way to make it our own, this is a really simple way that we can start taking licks and making it our own, is by just playing them in different spots of the neck. So let me do that one more time, and I'm just going to play with it a bit more. Take that idea and those different zones, but I'm going to kind of improvise based off of those licks. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so as you can see, I was really playing the lick, just messing with it. I wasn't playing added notes or extra notes. I was mainly changing the rhythm, maybe repeating a part of the phrase, you know, maybe just a fraction of the phrase and just hanging on it, or extending parts of the phrase, right? There's basically unlimited options of what we can do when we learn a lick to kind of change it up and make it our own. And I think learning that this B.B. King-ish lick in these different zones might just open your eyes on a few ways that we can start making these licks our own. All right, so this week was all about quick change blues. Okay, so we learned some new chord grips, we learned a new comping exercise, and then we learned a lick that specifically addresses the chords that happen in the first 4 bars of the quick change, where all the quick changeness happens. And then we learned how to take our BB box, which we learned last week, and play it all over the neck. Okay, cool. Make sure to download the tab. That'll be really helpful, especially learning those licks all over the fretboard. And if you have any questions, pop into the chat, leave your questions, and I will be answering them very soon. So thank you so much. I'll see you next week when we talk about minor blues. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Blues and Beyond. Hello! My name is Lance Ruby. Thank you so much for checking out week 2 of my live Blues and Beyond course. It was so fun. I was kind of popping in and out of the different places that it was live, and it was so fun. A lot of awesome people seem to be liking that lesson, so that was a ton of fun. All right, I have a couple questions already I'm going to start answering. I'm just going to dive right in. So the first question is, what do I do if bending is making my hand hurt? Well, there's a couple factors in that. There's just like the raw technique of bending correctly, okay? So typically we want to bend as like a fulcrum, okay? So here, let's see. I'll use my phone. So imagine the phone's my guitar neck, and I'm using like my thumb and my finger to bend the string up as a fulcrum with kind of the middle of kind of this L in our hand, right? I'm using that to bend up and down. As opposed to using our pure finger strength, I'm using that kind of fulcrum technique. The other reason your hand might be hurting from bending strings is the strings itself. You might want to take a look at the string gauge you're using. Typically, I would say if you're kind of brand new to string bending and you're having this problem, I would start definitely on an electric guitar. It's going to be way easier on electric guitar versus acoustic guitar, just because we have so much, an acoustic guitar has way more tension on each guitar string than an acoustic does, or than electric does, rather. And I would also suggest getting a pack of 9-gauge guitar strings, which is kind of it's very common. It's what Fender guitars ship with. They ship with 9s. So I would start at 9s. If that's still too rough, you can keep going down. There's 8s and 7s. Billy Gibbons from the band ZZ Top uses 7-gauge guitar strings, which are tiny, but they're really easy to bend because they are tiny. There's kind of a weird guitar myth that tells us that like bigger strings equal fatter tone, and that might be true, but it's not worth injuring ourselves to get fat tone. If you're having trouble bending a set of 10s or a set of 11s, I would go down either 1 or 2 string gauges to see if that kind of alleviates that pain. Okay, cool. Yeah, and so if you have any questions about anything, it doesn't have to be directly involved with the course, feel free to drop them in the chats, and they'll send them to me. So the next question I got is, what is B.B. King's best piece of music in your opinion? Oh man, this is a loaded question. I will say that I think some of his finest guitar playing is on the Live at the Regal album. That kind of whole era. He also did an album right after that called Blues is King, which is also really good. It's similar era of B.B. King, but Blues is King is really cool because he's playing with like a Hammond B3 organ player. And there's not many recordings of B.B. playing with Hammond B3. So that's Blues is King. That's a great album. But my personal favorite B.B. King album is B.B. King Live at the Regal, which is the Regal Theater. And I did a project last year, or basically when the beginning of the pandemic, I did a project where I transcribed. I basically learned all of the solos by ear and wrote them out for the Live at the Regal album, and I learned so much doing that. Definitely the stuff I was talking at the latter part of this lesson about the BB King box and moving that around. I definitely kind of got that by transcribing a lot of BB King solos, specifically the ones from Live at the Regal. He was really kind of on top of his game that night, it feels like. He was right on it. And that out, if you haven't, I mean, if you're a fan of blues and you haven't checked out BB King Live at the Regal, you definitely should. It's a great album. Cool. So yeah, any questions you have, leave them in the chat. I would be happy to answer them. But yeah, let's see. Do I have any more questions? Oh, looks like maybe some questions are rolling in. Oh, maybe not. That's all right too. Well, so basically, I'll just kind of talk about the lesson for a little bit. So the quick change blues, I mean, we just got done talking about it in detail, but I just want to kind of bring up one of the points I made it in the video again, which is there's really nothing wrong with avoiding the quick change blues, right? Like the lick we learned addresses, the first lick we learned addresses the changes that are happening, right? We're playing like out of this. Oh, sorry, I was playing it in B flat. It's really an A. But we're playing like this kind of shape. And that kind of addresses the one chord, the A chord. And then over the D chord, we're kind of playing this triad shape. So we can when we're playing, when we're wanting to play in a way where we're playing over the changes as opposed to ignoring the changes, a really simple way is just to see the basic chord shapes we use. Okay, so like this, the A triad shape, I have my third finger on the 4th string 7th fret, second finger on the 6th fret 3rd string, and then my first finger on the 2nd fret 5th string. But if we look at that, that's just inside of kind of our normal bar chord. Okay? Those notes are in there. So all I'm doing is I'm doing a hammer on to that middle note, and then I'm kind of doing the same thing to this D triad. And if we look at that D triad, or, right, some people kind of finger that chord like this, all I'm doing is kind of the same treatment to that triad shape. Right? And that addresses the quick change blues that happens in the first 4 bars, right? Okay, cool. So let me comp one, and then I'll kind of loop it and play it with a line, so you can kind of hear what I'm talking about. So, all right, here we go. So that line, by using, kind of playing with those triad shapes, my line, my soloing is saying this is a quick change blues, right? I'm playing out of an A major triad shape, and then I'm playing out of a D major triad shape. The only note that's really not in there is that I'm hammering on from 1 fret below of the 3rd note. And as we go through this course, we're going to be talking about more chords and more changes that we add to the blues. So this is a good kind of concept to get our minds around, because we're going to be exploring this further and further in this course. But yeah, like I said in the lesson, there's nothing wrong with just ignoring that and treating that all like it's a normal blues song, you know. Just playing blues stuff. Right? You could... Great guitar players playing that way. But it's kind of like what I said in the lesson. We don't really need to learn how to ignore the chord changes. we can kind of already do that. You know, I did this and I think it's worthwhile. There's a huge difference between practicing and playing, okay? And if you want to hear me talk more about that distinction, there's a toolkit I did for jam play where I talk about practicing a lot. I think it's called the practicing toolkit or something. But when we're practicing, we should be working on things we're weak at, right? And then when we're playing, we should be showcasing the stuff that we've kind of conquered in our practice. Okay, so just with those definitions, there's no reason that we should necessarily practice ignoring the quick change, right? We kind of already know how to do that if you're familiar with blues at all, or just brand new to it. We can already ignore the quick change, right? But it takes practice to be able to address that stuff in our solo. So, you know, that's kind of the difference between practice and playing. In my practice, I'm going to try and think about that stuff. Oh, this is a quick change blues, so in the second bar, I'm going to say something that says D, right? I'm going to say something that says the 4 chord. Whereas when I'm playing, if that part kind of hits me before I'm ready for it or whatever, right? I'm going to ignore it because that's totally fine. But in my practice, I'm going to work at the stuff I'm weak on, which for you might be playing stuff in our solos that says the chord changes. Cool. Yeah. That's my thoughts on that. But yeah, check out Live at the Regal. It's definitely one of the best examples of B.B. King's guitar playing, and it's just a great album. You know, it's one of those timeless live blues albums. It's a good way to convince your friends who aren't into blues that blues is rad. It's by showing them Live at the Regal. So cool. Yeah, if you have any questions, you only have a couple minutes, so leave them in the chats. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Last week we had some great questions about gear. I'm happy to answer anything like that, or about just kind of thought processes, practice, guitars in general, all that kind of stuff. So leave that in. And one big takeaway that I hope everybody gets from the lesson that we just watched is the idea of moving our licks around. Like once we learn a lick, not only should we move it to different keys, that's also very important, but we should also move it across the guitar and play it in different areas. Because as you heard with our B.B. King licks, we're going to be, we got a totally different vibe, a totally different sound by playing it on different string sets, right? So, the lick was something like this. Right? And then if we moved it down a string, totally different vibe, right? So all the licks you learn, try and explore them and not only play them in different keys, but also play them across the guitar neck on different strings. Okay, cool. Well, so I hope you learned a lot, and we will be back next week, same bat time, same bat place, 1 p.m. Mountain Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on the Jam Play website, on Facebook, on YouTube, with part 3, week 3. We are going to be talking about minor blues, okay? So I hope you join me for that, and I hope you learned a lot